a year ago, the standard way of going on for a project is opening Pinterest, and that was what I've been doing for my entire architecture career. And I kind of consider AI kind of a Pinterest on steroids. All of a sudden, I'm not just writing keywords to look at existing images, but I'm guiding my thinking and adding words and putting together concepts.
It's fascinating that people think that AI on its own have this ability to design and to guide things. When people say this was designed by AI, sometimes I reach out to them and say, this wasn't designed by AI, this was designed by you.
I think one of the key things that I believe we're gonna see more develop, and I would like to see develop, is the critical capability of looking at something and critically analyzing it, especially with the amount of images that we can generate quickly and effectively.
How much having a brief really helps. Otherwise, like when you're just playing with Midjourney, the possibilities are endless and you get lost. But when you have like a brief and you're told to do a certain thing, then you're like, okay, what are the tools I can use to ensure I get the best possible result for this brief?
One thing that I found very successful was iteration and iterative process. That iterative process that continuously feeds back into the outcome that you have, I think is fundamental. And that's the same approach that I take with AI. It's a continuous loop. One thing that I would give as a suggestion to people that are starting or want to start, don't be scared of giving up what you've done and start fresh, because sometimes you go down rabbit holes that don't really lead to anything and might not be what you want, and there is no point of continuing. Go back, start over, take a different approach, and then see where that leads you.
Hello and welcome to the third episode of AI Hub Podcast. Today we have Stefano with us. I've been a friend with Stefano through Instagram for not long, actually, maybe a few months. But we had AI in common between us. So that was the connecting point. But we were talking about things about AI and the work that he was doing. And he was telling me some very exciting stories. So I thought this is a great conversation that we should have on the pod. So hello, Stefano, and thank you for coming to the pod.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I've been looking at the work that you've been doing with the AI Hub and all this promotion and putting together great designers, and it's a wonderful initiative. And I think it's really helping people to have a view on what's happening, and not just few designers, but like a movement that is slowly taking on and grabbing the attention of more and more people.
Thank you so much. So where are you based at the moment?
So I'm based in London. I've been here for 13 years now. Done all my education. We have that in common as well. We were in the same uni.
Oh, Westminster.
For part two. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
I did part one, part two, part three at Westminster. So it became kind of a second home for 8 years.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, quite exciting. Nice place where to study.
Yeah, definitely was.
Moved around some practices, did different projects from residential through different stages, shopping centers and retail when it was fashionable a few years back, not anymore. And then now moved to a company that's called AFK that does mainly competitions and parametric design, looking for new technologies and new ways of tackling projects.
Right. And you've been doing architecture since you came to London, or you were doing architecture before as well? You studied in Westminster.
I did art school in Italy, and that kind of guided me towards architecture more rather than the artistic classical art way of using art as a medium of expression. I found architecture quite powerful and quite interesting and quite inspiring, the way we can use a kind of an art form to communicate with people and touch them in a different way. So that kind of led to moving to London, doing my part one, part two, part three, getting experience working in a reality that is the English reality, and thinking of going back at some point. And I'm still here, still enjoying it. And I think it's a great place where to be.
Yeah, I was in Milan like a few months ago, and Milan was also very, very amazing. I mean, I really love Milan. I don't know where you're from Italy, but it's just like a city that I just want to spend time forever for some reason. I feel like, everything is so chill and much calm, whereas in London, like you're in the rush, like everyone is running, and I kind of like this kind of Italianness in people, which is kind of, it's interesting because we Iranians and Italians, we I think we have a lot in common. So maybe that's what's connecting me to Milan. I don't know.
I mean, you saw Milan in the best week ever. I live 40 kilometers. I'm from originally 40 kilometers north of Milano, like in a small city. It's called Monza, where they do the Formula One. And Milan, you saw it in during design week, and that's or just after, and that's like when the city is buzzing is the best time to go. Weather is perfect, people are excited. The world of design comes to that place, to that tiny, quite human-sized city, and it's one party after the other, one exhibition after the other, one showroom after showroom, new technologies, amazing design, and amazing people. It's not always like this, but it's a wonderful city, and I think it's really pushing a nicer architecture and quite different from what people expect from Italy. You know, the Florence, Rome, Venice type of architecture, very historical. Milan has been pushing for a new contemporary architecture, so it's a city worth visiting, even though it might not be um, on the top of the list for many people that have never been to Italy. But stop by a couple of days, enjoy, see a different reality, and then just move to the more classical and known places.
It definitely is on top of my list, at least. But I'm curious to know. You talked about design week, and I was there for the design week as well. But I didn't see like many people, doing AI, anything with AI. I mean, I heard that there was a few exhibitions, little exhibitions, but I'm curious to know if you know like any interesting work that was presented during the design week with AI.
I I don't really know, and I think there is some kind of reluctance. And I had a couple of chats with Italian architects and professional, and there is this um, resistance to embracing AI that might be slightly different here, where I met most of the people at the forefront of doing AI images and using AI within the workflow. It's been taken more on board here in London rather than in Italy. And we confronted ourselves with some Italian designers, and they are kind of scared. They don't really know. They're not very well aware of the possibilities and how to use it. And as you might know, ChatGPT got banned in Italy as well for privacy issues. So I think that kind of fueled an adversarial relationship towards this new medium and this new tool that kind of led to the fact that I was not really involved within the design week, at least this year. I think next year we might see something more. Like I did something on the side just to try and show that there is an opportunity. I reimagined the Duomo through a different lens, and that kind of is the way that I use AI personally to try and reimagine some realities that might be there and everybody knows, but look look at them in a different way with a different set of rules that don't really apply to normal architecture.
You touched upon so many things that I want to, open them. But you mentioned about using something in reality and taking it to a kind of unreal state with AI. I also do this exercise with the kind of students in my workshop as well. We do this little exercises that they are designed in a way that you kind of push your creativity, and then like the one of the exercises was to design for the design week. So we set the brief so that they had to do something about the design week, so that they have to have Milan in context. So you had to see Milan in the context, and then uh, I I kind of saw immediately that how much having a brief really helps, because otherwise, like when you're just playing with Midjourney, I mean, the possibilities are endless and you get lost. But when you have like a brief and you're told to do a certain thing, to design a certain thing, a certain concept with AI, then you're like, okay, what are the tools, like what are the kind of um, keywords, what are the references, like image prompting or like blending, what are the different possibilities I can use to ensure I get the best possible result for this brief. Otherwise, if you have if you don't have any brief for yourself, you just get lost, in my opinion, and it's really difficult to do something. And it's interesting that you do this for yourself, like you set a brief and you're saying that, you know, you set this brief to do something unrealistic with the domo. And I saw that work and it's brilliant. And I think that's what kind of makes a difference, right? Otherwise, if someone is just gonna produce some nice images, quote unquote nice images, I mean, what's the point?
I think one of the key, I agree completely to have a brief, and I usually set myself a very strict brief, or I start from an idea or something that um, touches, like while walking around. I was walking in Shoreditch a few months ago, and there's this big wall where they do every 3 weeks they do a new advertisement wall art, and there was NSE bottle. And all of a sudden, while I was working, I was like, "Oh, that's a nice idea. I like the bottle that they did, but I wanted to try and combine it with my personal interpretation of that particular product." And all of a sudden, you know exactly what is the angle. You know, it's a bottle, and it's a whiskey bottle or a cognac, and it's Hennessy. So it has like a brand. You start researching what type of brand, what is the type of feel and idea that you can connect and link together. And then allows you to not, as you said, not be overwhelmed by the endless opportunities and the endless images that you can create. Because I think one of the big struggle that I have personally is image selection. You know, you're put in front of so many choices. What do you take and what do you let go? It's kind of the hardest part of everything, but then it's also the interesting part of using AI, because you can curate very well what you want the people to see. And I don't know whether to say it now, but it's one of the criticism that I received recently on many of the posts, and probably you had as well. It's AI that is doing it. It is. AI is the tool that I use, and nobody criticizes you for using Rhino as a tool. But I believe that the idea that people are able to bring to the table using this tool, it's much more, it's faster, but also open to completely new opportunities that then really reflect the sensibility and the personal take of a designer. And it just appears a through a tool that is incredibly powerful to create photorealistic images, especially V1, V5.1. But it's just a reflection of your own personality, because you select what you show the people. And I think that's quite important to highlight, and not just say it's AI doing it.
Yeah, I think people think, I mean, I don't really have a problem with, you know, other people who are not in the design field making statements that are not very close to reality. But somehow I receive these comments from people within the design industry saying that, you know, this was done with AI. Like, this was AI doing the thing. Like, this was designed by AI. And to me, that doesn't make any sense, because AI cannot design itself. Like, I mean, I'm working on a project which, I mean, I personally spend, me and my team, we spend like more than a week on producing 2 or 3 concept images to show the client. And that was definitely something that we directed. I mean, we used the AI program, but we definitely directed
Mhm.
it so hard in a way that, you know, we were so frustrated at some points. But it took us like a week and so, just to get the right sort of concept idea, um, kind of close to the initial idea that we had. So when people say this was designed by AI, and even some of the people who I know they're doing work with AI, they say that they even themselves say this was designed by AI, and sometimes I reach out to them and say this wasn't designed by AI, this was designed by you, but you chose to use a tool which was AI, and you could also choose something else, which could be Photoshop, which could be Rhino, which could be Revit, or something else, and still get a result maybe close to this, but like maybe less creative, or you would have to put more time to get into the get the final results. But it's fascinating that people think that AI on its own have this ability to design and to guide things. Whereas, what is your idea of a designer? What do you think a designer really does in terms of if you're sitting on the seat of a designer, what is the difference between the work that you do, for example, and the work that AI does? Just for the clarification of people who might confuse AI with the designer itself. When who you are using AI in your projects, you're going to talk about the projects that you do also. But what is the difference between you as a designer and the AI as a tool?
I mean, if you see a year ago, the standard way of going on for a project, the beginning of the project, generating idea, and I think everybody can relate to this, is opening Pinterest and start spending time looking, relooking, searching, going, click to the next one, see what are the picture related, select that one, just go down rabbit holes and discover new things. And that was what I've been doing for my entire architecture career, for university, and I still do, because I think it's a very powerful tool, Pinterest or Google or any search engine, any software, and sorry, any program that you can look for images. And I kind of consider AI, the moment I started using it, kind of a Pinterest on steroids, where all of a sudden I'm not just writing keywords to look at existing images, but I'm guiding my thinking and adding words and putting together concepts in order to get closer to my vision. Because if you think about it, an architect or a designer, the moment you say a couple of words, they can easily put something into their mind that create a vision, and it's quite immediate. You have your own data set that is based on experience, it's based on culture, it's based on travels that you've done, things that you've seen, everything that goes and make the person that you are. And all of a sudden you're tapping into this knowledge and putting together ideas, and not just looking at images that are done by somebody else and they're there on Pinterest, but all of a sudden you're choosing and guiding and controlling to the extent that you can, and refining the ideas that you are looking through Discord, and all of a sudden selecting and making decisions and taking it to the next level. So I see it as I said, Pinterest on steroid, but that's kind of the way I've been using it. And I think people should really realize that it's the images that you get, as well as in ChatGPT, are only as good as the prompt that you input. So bad prompts are bad images or bad outputs from ChatGPT. Good prompts can lead to probably a good image, but it's definitely like a beginning of a conversation, the beginning of a new discovery journey through opportunities that might not be there and might not be imaginable by you because of your limited data set in terms of experience or the ability to put concepts together.
Yeah, it's fine. I can put some of your AI images in animation so that people can enjoy watching them while you're talking. But it's very interesting that you say you mentioned prompts, because I was thinking, previously we as designers, we had different tools to design, right? We had maybe CAD, or not CAD because that's not very relevant, but when it comes to AI, your tool is going to be your language, is going to be your keywords. And what is the difference between a designer today, whereas we are seeing that Photoshop, Revit, Rhino, all of them are going towards a direction where they are integrating AI into their softwares. So we're going to see the kind of prompt engineering aspect in the future in all of these set of softwares. So people are going to, see AI in all of the tools that they're going to use in the future. Um, and I wonder, what is the difference between someone who, designs in architecture practice now and someone who will be designing in architecture practice, let's say, the next 10 years? I guess all of the tools that they have AI integrated into it. So the way that the designer should communicate with these softwares is via language, via keywords. What do you think is going to change in terms of the the way designers are being educated and thought in the schools and in university now versus maybe 10 years later, where the prompt engineering is going to play a huge role in the design process of every designer?
I think one of the key things that I believe we're gonna see more develop, and I would like to see develop, is the critical capability of looking at something and critically analyzing it, especially with the amount of images that we can generate that quickly and effectively. So why one image is better than the other one? It's your capability of looking closely and not just accepting what you have or be content or push the boundary to the next level. So I think critical analysis and critical thinking is one key thing. Also, ability to reference. My Italian background, I studied art for many years, like probably 4 or 5 years, and we went through names, we went through name of artists, sculptures, looking at different type of architecture, like for the Italian heritage of architects, from Palladio to Brunelleschi to going all the way to Gaudí and Mies van der Rohe. So and Le Corbusier, we looked at different type of architecture, or because our course was focused on architecture, but like also painting wise. So you're probably like, and one thing that I didn't find in the UK when I came here was this importance towards referencing and teaching students like history of art, or like examples that you can then draw back to or take inspiration from. So I think one thing that I would like to see is since we're going to use words and we're going to use images that we know and how we can prompt them, probably like a focus on a more image, a focus more on knowledge in terms of like what has been before, but also spreading to different fields. So I put a lot of biomimicry and natural forms into what I do, and I go and research for the type of mushroom that has a particular structure that I can implement within the prompt. It's not just a mushroom. It might be like a very specific name that I find through Pinterest. And I usually look for specific things on Google and then try and prompt them and try and get the same kind of structure that is in nature and bring it within the prompt to then mix with architecture or product or anything that comes to mind during the design development. So I think those two things are going to be quite key, because there's going to be still quite a focus on traditional tools like Grasshopper, Rhino, Revit, because the industry of construction, especially for practicing architect, is still going to be moving very slow, apart from a few examples that can really push the boundaries of fabrications. But that doesn't prevent these studios where there is more traditional type of architecture to be using AI as a source of inspiration. So I think there's going to be what we have today, and there's going to be an addition to a more linguistical and knowledge based on references that probably it's going to become more and more important, because you have to kind of justify your decisions through the words that you're going to put in the prompt.
it's very fascinating that you talk about um, designers being multi-sided and not just be good at words and keywords in architecture, but research also other fields like science or other technologies, because I feel like architects are usually very in their silos. They're working alone. They're not having any discourse with any other sort of profession other than like in construction. I was always a fan of architects really kind of engaging with people in tech, for example, in science, for example. We've seen loads of cool things coming from material engineering and material technology that has to do with science, but architects themselves, I don't think they currently have so much conversation with anyone else. But I think the designers of tomorrow and architects of tomorrow included, they have to be multi-sided. They have to have conversations, as you say, with other professionals in different fields, and also research other fields, because otherwise all of your knowledge, all of the keywords that all of the sort of ideas that you get, they are going to be limited to your own kind of field, and that's going to be, I mean, you're going to repeat yourself, because what can you create as something new if you're just like only focusing on architecture itself? But that's something that we see in your work, for example.
One very good example that I can give you was working on a competition, and we started talking with marine biologists. At the moment you start tapping into the word as specific and not easy to comprehend and metabolize very well everything that they were saying, all of a sudden it gives you like inputs to then go and research for different approaches. And the moment you shift to something that is not really relevant to architecture, marine biology is not relevant at all, and it's probably nobody's ever gonna include the part if you make probably an aquarium or something like that. But all of a sudden that exploration led to so much more than just knowing about corals and fishes and species, and it became a source of inspiration for shapes and ecosystems and how we could deal with certain problems of the project just from learning from their knowledge on the ground and how they deal with things. And we were able to then implement it within the project. So that, as you said, we cannot just be in our silos, especially today, given the opportunity to have such an incredible tool that is ChatGPT or AI, image generation, image journey, DALI, stable diffusion. We can all of a sudden really bring those concepts and make them very evident we can make them very, how do I say this? We can incorporate them so much better within the design, thanks to being able to visualize them quickly through AI.
I was just going to ask you about, I'm curious to know what your process is. And first of all, like what purpose, like in the beginning, obviously, like I think most of us really use AI as a tool for exploration, but I'm curious to know, how did you get into the world of AI generally, and like what sort of prompted you to use AI and to also post your work on social media? Because I know some people that they are doing like they're designing with AI, but they're not very active also to showcase their work to other people, because they fear that people judge them of someone who just uses AI. And I don't know, there is something that people feel that if someone uses AI, they're just doing nothing, and that's apparently something that people feel sometimes, a perception that people have, which obviously is not true. But you're very active on social media. You're doing different presentations and talks in different places. You just did an exhibition in Venice Biennale, a very successful sort of exhibition, as well as doing so much other stuff. And you have so much stories also to tell us about you quitting your job as well. But I want to ask you, how did you start with AI? And then also what your process was in the beginning, and also what is your process now? And what was this transition between that kind of old process? Because I had a different process in the beginning, and now I have a different one. And this is like changing every time there is an update coming, or there's a new tool. So I'm getting adapted by the new stuff that are coming to our way. But I'm curious to know.
So I started working with AI through a competition. We had to come up with a concept for a project that it was very hard to imagine, and we couldn't find any reference. So we started playing with AI. It was V3, and it was extremely tedious and hard to work with that. Nothing was working well. There were a lot of words, trying to put a lot of concept, and I was not able to find the right balance with words. After a while, V4 came out, and then the moment V4 came out, it was a game changer. It was it gave your an ability to visualize very quickly with very few words what your concept was in a very photorealistic way. So that kind of reset everything, because the long prompts that I was trying to put together, the more words, I started going back to a more minimal approach, to few words, and then build up to there. And one thing that I found very successful was iteration and iterative process. I've been doing that quite a few through university, through digital fabrication. It starts from the computer, and then you test it on a model, like a small scale, like 1 to 50, and then you go back to the computer. You design, you understand what were the mistakes, you go back to a model at 1 to 20, and that loop that all of a sudden you create between digital and real inspire your digital work through reality, and vice versa. So that's the kind of work that I did for an Burning Man art installation that we did in 2018. It was designed through a script in Grasshopper, and then brought to life by normal ways of bending pipes and cutting wood and welding and all those things. But the learning from the end product that was then brought to the Playa was completely different from the beginning of the design process through Rhino and Grasshopper. So that iterative process that continuously feeds back into the outcome that you have, I think is fundamental. And that's the same approach that I take with AI. It's a continuous loop between what I see, going back. If it works, great, I continue. If it doesn't work, I put it aside, or I try and fix it, remove the words, go back to basic, add more words, change the order of words, trying to balance concepts that might be very different from each other, and then see if those combination of words in that particular order works for the output that I want to achieve. If not, go back to the beginning. One thing that I would give as a suggestion to people that are starting or want to start, don't be scared of giving up what you've done and start fresh, because sometimes you go down rabbit holes that don't really lead to anything and might not be what you want, and there is no point of continuing. Go back, start over, take a different approach, and then see where that leads you.
And also, what do you think is the I personally suggest people who start to only do keyword prompting and not image prompting, because that makes you much more aware of what you put as kind of keywords in the first place and what you think. Because if you're just using images or like blending, you're using the software, but you're not really thinking. You know what I mean? Like if you use words,
Yeah,
you use also your brain as well. Otherwise, like if you only use images, that's going to be okay. I like this, I want to get something like this, but like you don't know deep inside that what is it that you want to see in the image. So something that I see being very powerful is that when you use words, It makes you think actually about the concept that you're trying to build. What is this? What does this word mean next to this other word that I'm going to put it next to? Um, and then after you've done that, you kind of start to use some image referencing to maybe try to make your image being like take inspiration from something that already um, inspired you in some ways. And
Uh,
also, yeah, go on.
One thing on that point, I barely use image prompting, mainly because of the reason that you said. There is not much thinking about it, but there is even less control into what you want to achieve. And I played a bit with the description way of doing prompting from Midjourney, and I don't like it because I don't understand what concepts and what the words do. So if I'm not, that's the only place where I can be, let's say, in control. And if I'm not the one inputting the words, then all of a sudden it's AI designing it. At that point, kind of the balance shift more towards the AI making it rather than me being in control as much as I can through the words that I choose.
Yeah, that's definitely a great point. I feel like the ideal scenario is that you only using prompts, but at the moment, I think we are not at the stage that Midjourney is so good at reading all of your keywords in a perfect way, because every time you write something, there's always a kind of randomness that kind of plays a part in the final outcome. The thing that I found slightly useful is that when you're having a brief that you have to work towards, it slightly gets very frustrating when you cannot get something from only prompts, because you already have some image references and you just want to direct the project, but you also want to use some of the kind of nuance that you want to give to this sort of reference to make something that kind of aligns with the brief. So that's where I see the image prompting being very useful, where you have like less time to play with things and you want more control. So you kind of insert something to just push Midjourney slightly further to get more closer to the kind of result that you want to get. But as you say, that's the ideal scenario of you just using prompts. But have you used the Photoshop AI tool, the integrated generative fill?
No, I'm very looking forward to it. I saw it a couple of days ago. I've been busy. I need to download it and start playing with it because I think that's a really interesting feature. And I think you can really control the image and refine it. Because at the moment, like a process that I've been doing now, V5.1 became much better, but there was quite a bit of editing to the image that you create from Midjourney. Would go then through DALI and then Photoshop to finish it up. So the image that I put on Instagram, it's not the image that I usually get from Midjourney, and I'm very open to say, and that's an extra skill that you have to add. It's not just AI, but it's the work that goes into the final image. That it's just one that people see, and they don't see the hundreds that you've done before. Um, to go back to your point of image prompting, it depends for what I use it for. Like for my personal work, I tend not to use it because I have the time to just explore. For work, like in my day-to-day, we've been working on a competition and I had a very close reference that I had to use. So yes, for very close references that I wanted to reshape and reimagine, yes, I use an image prompting and then a prompt on top of that.
Yeah, I think that's a great workflow for some specific type of tasks. But I'm curious to now ask you about your work because you said it. I'm curious to see, what AI has enabled you to do next with your career, because you were talking about quitting your job and doing something else with AI, which sounds very fascinating. And you also know that I've also done something very similar. So I'm curious to know what is the kind of the kind of new uh, pathway to your career that you found for yourself, and how is AI helping you in that?
Yeah, so I use AI in different ways. I use a professional way in my office, in the office where I work. It's to aid the design team and to aid parts of the design that might not be developed enough or that we haven't had the time to think, and just try and generate ideas to kick off a conversation. So if you see the images that you create as and to itself as a beginning of a conversation that can generate a debate, and different people can bring up different things, I think it's an incredible useful tool to use within practice. You don't have to use the image you create as your final output. It's just a working tool and a working image that all of a sudden makes you question certain things, and you look at the details of how certain things work, and you might like a specific column or the connection between a column and a roof, or how the windows are laid out, or the rhythm of the facade. And that can all of a sudden fits back into your standard way of working, that is Rhino modeling. And I think that's one aspect. And also for inspiration for things that you might know what you want. So we did a sculpture staircase for a project. We had the references. We knew more or less what we wanted to do. The exploration in AI was mainly focusing on how can we treat the timber differently? What are the opportunities? What are the options that we can investigate? And can we mix them with the precedent that we have? And that kind of help the design team to question what they were looking at. So that's one way of using it. The other way that I use it is purely for personal research. Hopefully it's going to become more of a working tool, and I'm aiming towards that direction, to use it to imagine, help the conversation. And one thing that I'm trying and developing is not being focused on architecture, but to all of a sudden work horizontally across different disciplines. And as designers, as architects, we're really good at incorporating and managing information. So all of a sudden we have a tool that allows us to be not just architects, but we can be a product designer, we can be branding designer. We can all of a sudden come up with a much more developed concept for our clients and bring that concept and develop it from different aspects. That is not just the architectural piece itself.
I think you touched upon something that I really like, and that has definitely been part of my journey with AI as well, because previously I was an architectural assistant in an office. I'm a part two. I haven't done my part three yet. I was hoping to do this year, but I quitted my job. So I'm hoping to do it later. But generally speaking, most architects I see, they are multi-sided people. They're not only architects. They also have interest in other things, and we are usually very good problem solvers as well. We are usually good at tackling specific problems with design. And I think architecture, meaning coming with a single product which is building all the time, for every problem, to propose, a building for as a solution to all problems that comes to us. I found it quite difficult because, you have these interest in other fields and other technologies and other ways of solving problems, but you're limited to only solve problems using buildings. But what I found very fascinating with AI was that it kind of liberated us as architects or designers suddenly, that we didn't have to have like amazing 3D modeling skills or amazing sort of rendering skills. Suddenly we almost became creative directors, art directors, became directors in a way, which we could direct any creative project. And that to me changed my career, from being an architect, only doing buildings. Now I'm doing interior design, I'm doing creative direction, for a virtual reality project, and all other kind of similar projects that are not only architecture, but without AI, I couldn't have done them, because I wasn't very, um, I wasn't skilled in creative direction in a way that I create like amazing kind of renders for a virtual reality project. But now I can creatively direct something via AI, and I don't have to put like 3 months into 3D modeling or something. I can definitely use my workflow, which is now actually Midjourney and Photoshop AI, which really makes my job much easier, because I can, as you say, because Midjourney images are usually not very finished, finalized in a way. There's almost a kind of element of surprise in every single photo that Midjourney produces. So you kind of want to make sure that your image is as perfect as possible. So now Photoshop gives me this ability to make something perfect. And this is now really, really helping the projects that I'm working on. And it has kind of added much more time to, I mean, I'm saving much more time, because I don't need to do something in Midjourney to do like maybe 10 iterations until I get to a result that I like. I can take the third or fourth iteration and take it to Photoshop and do the things that I like to, and then see it sort of slightly finalized. And I really like the fact that you say it has also helped you to not only be an architect, but also develop your other interests in other fields as well, to do other things as well. But if you like, you can explain what you're doing, any interesting projects that you're working on, or what do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Do you see yourself to be a typical architect doing only buildings, but maybe add a sort of interest in other fields as well? Or you actually see yourself to be someone who does so many different things, and maybe architecture is only a part of it?
I think this, I'm an architect, and that background will always stay part of who I am, and it will be there for everything that I do. One thing that I've been trying to put on, that I shared with people on Instagram, was different ideas. It could be from the bottle to the Vespa to their interpretation of the Duomo to a broccoli facade for Harrods, or a concept design for La Durée, looking at the shop front, then the interior, then going down to design the macaron as well. So all of a sudden you are in charge of all those aspects that can link to each other through the prompt that you do. And the prompts are not always the same, depending on what you're prompting, depending on what you're designing. It changes the prompt, it changes the structure, the approach. But that all of a sudden gives you the opportunity to really explore any possible thing. Like, there is no limit to the imagination. And I think that's why, going back to one of the questions that I didn't answer before, why I like to share with people is because it's my personal interpretation of certain things. And I was all of a sudden making so many images that I found I wanted to collect some, and it helped me be more selective to a limit of 10, because that's the limit of a post, and be more finding a point where to stop, because that was quite a struggle that I had. Where do you stop? What is you say for a project, you stop at the third, fourth iteration. That's the same if I have to deliver the project. But for my personal development, where do I stop? What is the end point? Am I content? Am I happy with what I see? So limiting yourself to 10 images that you have to then bring forward kind of make you be more critical and looking more closely at what idea you're bringing to the table. And consistency is one thing that I'm trying to look at. Depending on what I'm bringing, if there is a reference to certain things, or if it's a concept for 10 different Vespa, imagine with 10 different skins, what are the 10 different Vespas, or 10 helmets for Formula One, because there was a Drive to Survive starting. Just looked at the series, I was like, oh, I can make helmets for each one of the teams. So then trying and get the essence of the team, bring it there in my own personal interpretation. So I think down the line, the project that I'm working on is still like in the beginning process, in the early stages. It's still not really something that I can develop. There's going to be more and more coming in the next few weeks. Hopefully, I need to take a bit of a break and reassess, but there are a few things coming. There is exciting opportunities to educate and also make clients aware of how we can benefit them and benefit the decision making. Because one thing that I noticed, and you probably notice as well, it's very easy to say what you don't like. And that was something that Neil Leach from Design Future, I met him in Venice, and he told me one very interesting thing while we were with Tim Fu having a drink. It was, we are the best discriminator, and at the moment is the best job that we can have within the AI. We cannot compete at the level of intellectual and capability of processing information, but we are extremely good at say what we like and what we don't like. So if that's our role, we are creative directors, and all of a sudden your creativity really transpires through the work that you do. And, you know, you're using a medium that is coming and it's comparable to photography. You know, photographers, everybody can take a picture. It is as simple as clicking a button. With the iPhone now, it's extremely easy. But what is the subject? How do you take it? The composition, all the things that go behind just the picture are what make a picture and a photographer, let's say, more talented or more relevant than others. So I think I had one question that was very interesting, and I would like to ask you as well is, wait, I just lost the question.
Don't worry, it will come back later. But while you're thinking, I can ask my question, my final question from you. What do you think is the difference between the creativity of machine and the creativity of humans?
I think the main difference is data set. So, you know, we are using Midjourney that has a very defined data set. We are training this data set, and that's why it's getting so good at it. All the people that are using it are training it more and more and more. So the knowledge that the machine has, it's incredible. But going back to my point, we are the one taking the decisions, at least for now, at least for today. We are the one selecting what image we're bringing forward and what image you're showing to your audience, to the public, to your client. So there is a big difference in terms of knowledge because we know what we know. And the same goes for AI. AI knows more than we do. But your sensibility is something that at the moment AI cannot really reproduce. There is no, if you think about it, like AI gives you a set of images that for the AI are all correct. They're all fitting the words, the prompt that you write. So there is no judgment from AI in terms of what's good or what's bad. It's all, the four options are all good because they all fit the parameters. They all link to the words that you use, and they all create the outcome that you try to achieve for your prompt. The differentiation is that all of a sudden you can critically analyze and look at, okay, I like this one because that's closer to the idea that I had at the beginning. And that goes back to the first point that you were making. A very clear and defined brief is the best way to enter this. Don't enter just exploring. It could be fun, but you kind of have a direction. So then you can direct the AI. And as today, we still have to be the one, we are still the one directing AI towards the output. I don't know what it's going to be in the next 6 months in the development that is been happening so quickly. So we might become obsolete very soon, but I don't think that's probably the case. Your sensibility is always going to stay with you, and you're always going to be able to be different from other people because we can use the same prompt, same words, exactly same structure, and decide and select completely different things. Why? Because your sensibility as a designer and as an artist or as an architect drives you towards a certain choice that might be completely different from mine.
Exactly. Very, very to the point. I really love the last kind of point you made. But it's been a pleasure to have you on the pod, and I can't really end this conversation, but I have to. But I look forward to bring you for another session maybe later on, to talk about the projects that you're doing, when you have hundreds of them. You've done hundreds of them, and then you can talk about your experience and everything that people like to hear from you. But let the listeners and the viewers know if you want to leave the podcast with a statement or something that you'd like to tell them, advise, anything. But also, we'll put all of your socials and your email address or anything that you like to put in the description so that people can get in touch with you as well.
It's been a pleasure. I think, thank you again for having me. It's been an honor and a pleasure. I really enjoyed this conversation. And as you said, I would like to keep going. I have so much more to talk. We can talk about in another time, maybe another time, as you said, with more projects that are coming. There will be, and hopefully it's trying and help people to see how we can use it for what it is and how it can really help us and aid us. One thing that I would like to say is education and training and making people aware of this tool rather than being very skeptical and scared and not embracing it. I think it's detrimental. We need to be, it's a powerful tool that is disrupting almost every industry. I don't think there is one that is not been disrupted by AI in different ways, with different tools. If we are not the one teaching and learning and trying to understand how this can benefit our life, we all of a sudden be overwhelmed and become obsolete. So we need to be critical, understanding the limitation, but also understanding the benefit and how we can use it to benefit our own personal workflow and make us better designer.
Amazing. And I think you're doing a great job with also educating people about AI as well. But thank you so much for coming. I'll probably grab a coffee with you if you accept my invitation, probably before the next session that we bring you on the pod. But it was lovely to speak to you for the first time today. Yeah, looking forward to see you next. And
likewise,
thank you so much.